Please.
Excuse me, the speaker in the middle. Secretary. Does everyone in the military have the right to a chaplain of their religion?
That's a very interesting question. So the way that the Chaplain Corps works is that chaplains are there for four things. One is to facilitate for members of their own faith group. One is to provide for those of other faith groups. One is to counsel, and another is to provide command advisement. So it is the job of a Protestant chaplain to provide for Jewish sailors, soldiers, Marines. But that Jewish sailor, soldier, Marine can't say, you know what, I need a Jewish chaplain to show up. Right? So what happens is the folks who manage these chaplain corps try to balance the number of folks in the chaplain corps based on what they perceive to be the needs of their service. So when most aircraft carriers go out, there are about 10 aircraft carriers in operation right now, they go out with a Catholic chaplain. And that Catholic chaplain will serve the needs of that entire carrier strike group. So they will fly out from the carrier to the destroyer that kind of tags along with the carrier and so on. But if you're on a sub, right, the sub isn't going to surface just so that you can see a chaplain, right? So the folks in the submarine community really don't get to see chaplains as much. When they're at their sub base, of course they do.
I have a question for you. When you talk about Aguna, is it, and you say that in America you can go and you can get married in regular, in civil court. But it doesn't count as marriage in the Jewish law, right?
Okay, well, it's going to depend on what Jewish legal authority you deal with, right? That is to say, the Reform movement, right, treats particularly divorce such that parties who are civilly divorced do not also require a religious divorce.
So they
right?
don't need.
Whereas the conservative and Orthodox movements require the get, and don't necessarily care about the civil divorce in the same way. Right.
Okay.
Correct.
So women from Israel can come here and get married in civil court if they are Aguna?
If she's an Aguna in Israel,
Yeah.
right? The civil courts, aren't going to care about what. Yeah. Sorry. Right. So the question is, she married in Israel?
Yeah.
Oh, so she's actually married in Israel, and she wants to get married in the States. You want to weigh in on this?
Sure. All she needs to do is move to America, establish residency here, file for divorce here.
For divorce in the courts here, and
We'll
then get
divorce
married.
her
Correct.
without any care about Jewish law.
Right.
But
She'll
she'll
be-
some divorce.
She'll be civilly
Civil
divorced.
divorce.
Right. She won't be. She'll still be an Aguna according to Jewish law, right? She goes to a conservative or Orthodox rabbi for religious marriage. At that point, the conservative or Orthodox rabbi will say, "Where's your get?" Right. But if she goes to a justice of the peace will say, "Where's your civil divorce decree?" Right. Now, if she asserts that she was divorced in Israel, then she's going to say, where's proof of that? But if she gets divorced in America, as Professor Burroughs pointed out, then she doesn't need to have a religious divorce in America as well.
Can I segue into a bigger question, which is really for Professor Helfand? How much government accommodation of idiosyncratic religious practices of any faith should we tolerate? I'm not talking about Smith's exemptions. I'm talking about affirmative government legislation. Do you think the get law is unconstitutional? And do you think that other accommodations, of which there are many of them, I'm not talking about immunization from negative laws. I'm talking, which is really what Smith deals with. I'm talking about positive accommodations of religious practices.
Do you have an example in mind besides the get law?
Sure. Let's consider immunization. Let's consider a statute which says, here are the 6 authorized methods of slaughter plus kosher slaughter.
like what we have now.
Oh my gosh, isn't that an amazing coincidence? Sure. I mean, but I could give you many examples. The state of Georgia, where I live, has many.
Just when you talk about positive versus negative, there's a complicated baseline issue.
Yes,
so
of
I don't
course,
know,
I understand.
Okay, so I just want to get a
And
kind
I
of
want to
flavor
know
for
in
what
the
you're
context,
looking
let's say, of consumer protection laws.
for. Okay.
Do you think the government can ensure that all tefillin sold are kosher under consumer protection laws?
So let me just try to
Just
split
tell me a
between.
bigger theory.
Yeah. So let me split between two different types of cases. So on the consumer protection laws, I have a view that nobody agrees with. And courts don't agree with this. I'm going to say things that are not law now. In fact, this article of mine is most frequently cited. There's a convention in law review articles. If you want to cite to somebody who stands for the proposition you described, you say, see so-and-so. If you want to cite someone who you think is a moron, you write, but see. This article is always preceded by the words, but see. So my view is that courts have the ability to resolve religious questions. One way in which the Establishment Clause comes up is not when a court is being asked to speak on behalf of religion or to pray, but when a court's asked a question that requires the court, in order to answer the question, to delve into a religious matter. Let me give some fun examples. One famous one, not just phylacteries or tefillin, but like kosher cases. There's a class action lawsuit that was filed in Minnesota against Hebrew National. They answered to a higher authority. Well, they say there's a whole bunch of fraud going on over there, and they want hundreds of millions of dollars saying that the kosher hot dogs aren't really kosher. This lawsuit was dismissed because the court said, we don't have a way to figure out if this hot dog is kosher or not. I actually think courts can do much more in that area. My primary way of thinking about this area of the First Amendment is we protect individuals and we protect institutions, but government has the ability to do quite a lot of things when it's not infringing on the rights of individuals or infringing on the rights of institutions. Government can do quite a lot of stuff when it comes to religion. So in the spaces in between. So I don't think there's a major harm when a court says, you Hebrew National are making this all up, you're a bunch of fraudsters, you owe people hundreds of millions of dollars, everybody knows this isn't kosher. I don't see there a significant free exercise or Establishment Clause harm. Again, a lot of people do. A lot of people think that for a court to say this is kosher and this is not is like saying pledge allegiance to the Pope. That's not my view. So in those types of cases, but I see those as different than some of the other cases that you've mentioned, not to pass judgment on the Get law, but I just see it as a different kind of case. Or you mentioned the slaughter. There, when you identify, you have to start asking questions about, have you done a good job providing for exceptions for a wide variety of people so that nobody feels like a political outsider? I think that's important.
Can you forgive the weak legal mind I have for one question on that?
Not
I
at
mean,
all.
no, it's one
You're
of the-
just asking a weak legal mind.
Well, no, I mean, is one of the baseline issues here the government deciding what's religion and what's not?
Yeah.
I mean, and I was thinking of the thing in the New York Times last week about the guy with the pagan church, and was it Colorado? Did anyone else see this? That sort of the question of, is it a religion, is it not? Does it deserve this protection, and how far will you go?
Yeah, so the what is a religion question, nobody knows the answer to that. No, that's the bottom line. That's just the truth of it. And it's not just for our constitutional, but you have a Religious Land Use Institutionalized Persons Act, you have a Religious Freedom Restoration Act. There's a baseline question that there are millions of theories of that, but I think the way we operate when it comes to religion is really a know it when you see it type of attitude. That being said, as I mentioned, we had a little bit of an exchange before, I think there definitely is a move in terms of what professors are writing about that often has absolutely nothing to do with what's actually going on in the world. Professors worrying about whether or not religion is special in some way and trying to identify what it is about religion that deserves protection, and then thinking about how that can be expanded. That's come up in some cases, like the draft cases, and to the extent you push the envelope there, you avoid having to answer that question, which I think you rightfully note seems like if I say you're a religion, you're not a religion. It looks like I'm saying something I shouldn't.
I mean, the German case for me, it's sort of this question, right? You do a confessional society where you register as a Catholic, as an evangelical, as a Jew, as a Muslim, and in fact then you have you pay your church tax and you have those protections, and they have a man in the theology faculty thinking about things for you.
Right. No, that's and a lot of the countries around the world that adopted the Millet system in some way, or ways in
Yeah.
which that religious affiliation is entrenched and enshrined in the political legal system. You have that. You know, there's a fundamental problem over here. People will tell you lots of things about how we can define religion. I'm not particularly convinced. I think as a result, you often get very expansive definitions of the word religion because you never want to say no to anybody. It's like once you give something to one kid, I have 3 children. Like, you want candy, but now you can have candy. Now you can have candy too, right? It's just how it goes. Otherwise, you're going to end up in a line drawing scheme that I think has some pretty serious constitutional problems.
Can I follow up with that? Do you think that the United States could move to a millet system in which there's also a secular option?
Could, meaning constitutional.
A constitutional, yes.
Oh boy.
Then I'm going to ask you about your parenting skills.
I've never thought about that. I think a millet system would be a bad idea politically. I'm trying to think about if anybody needs examples of why. Well, but there's no short list. And you'd have a secular option in the millet system?
Of course,
Because like...
for people who don't identify.
Or maybe an
By the way, this is
agnostic and an
actually-
atheist
Well,
one,
this is
right?
actually coming up in the issue of chaplaincy in the military.
And Germany, more or less, has a millet system plus a secular option.
So, you know,
Which is growing very quickly right now.
Right, I got it. No, I'm picking another country sort of we have a long history with.
Yeah. Off the top of my head, I'm struggling to figure out. There will be some challenges, but logistical challenges will be legal. I assume you don't want me to address the logistical challenges,
No.
but it's hard. It's hard to. I don't want to come off as saying no problem, because they really are legion. Like who's in charge of the office? Like okay, we'll have the Jewish option. So who? I mean, in the process of picking who, you're going to have some pretty serious establishment clause problems. So how thinly are you going to slice it? Ideologically, philosophically, doctrinally, denominationally. I mean, I don't know if we have a constitutional razor that cuts that thin. So let me just say that there seem to be, as I think about this for the first time ever, maybe I should have thought about it before.
On tape.
Yeah, on tape. The worries logistically seem to be so significant that I have a tough time seeing how it would work with a constitutional system. But I'm open to proposals. I'm open to proposals. There we go. I successfully dodged that one.
I'd like to ask a question of the third speaker.
Oh boy.
From a macro perspective,
Yeah.
it's my understanding that the Western Europe evolved, they had royalty. And the royalty had all the benefits, but they didn't want to go ahead and deal with the people and the people problems, so they delegated to the church the legal system of dealing with people-to-people problems. Is that a correct analysis? And then once the royalty was replaced by politics, by government, and government adopted laws and created government institutions to deal with people-to-people problems.
No, it raises an important point. I'd say it's partially correct but not complete, I think, or there's an insight there. But it's sort of like what I was trying to get at with this idea of sort of fragments of the state, right? Is that the thing that is interesting in European history, and maybe we can come back to the founders and sort of why a millet system is probably not what sort of John Adams had in mind, is that there's really a multiplicity of sort of bodies. I mean, at the beginning, yes, I'm saying that sort of ecclesiastical institutions and church courts kind of take on some of the state's functions. But at the same time, partly through emulation, sort of royalty princes, sort of monarchs of the higher Middle Ages start to create their own institutions, sort of these, so that by the High Middle Ages you really have, it's not just a sort of competition or sort of the possibility of forum shopping between lay and religious courts or lay and religious kind of governmental institutions, if I could say, but between sort of a number of levels of lay institutions, because all of this is sort of built accretively. all of the kind of nation states you see in Europe today are basically clusters of little principalities. So at the bottom there's, a village, and they have their own organizations. Then there's sort of the lordship with a few villages, and then there's the larger principality with its own organizations. And in many places in Europe, at every level, there's sort of there's this level of jurisdiction and a level of administration. And so one of the things that happens over at the end of the Middle Ages and into this sort of early modern period is this kind of, not necessarily a reduction of this diversity at this point, but it's domestication by stronger monarchs. You have to wait until maybe the 19th or 20th century to get really sort of the kind of suppression, I think, dominance of the state's justice, in the sense of getting rid of sort of manorial tribunals. But a lot of these things last. Manorial courts in England, I think, still function for property transfers in some places into the 20th century, certainly in places like the Russian Empire. But justices of the peace aren't anything that, they're just better integrated over the period. So I will stop there, but I think, there's a kind of, they sort of delegate, or just secular rulers can't deal with this, but I think there's a kind of emulation, right? A kind of stratification of the church, and then a Christianization of governance, or something like this, you might say.
We have time for one more question.
Well, it's just more of
One more
follow-up. I think that we should think really seriously about the opting out option, because if in Israel it's millet system, and the opting out is not just just a formal law, because it's not just law, because there is also the religious and social sanction of the group. So it's taking, for example, in Israel. So since the new millennium, so Arab Muslim women can approach court before the civil court, the family civil court in Israel, and before that they couldn't, just Jewish women, Jewish people. I'm talking about women because women, Muslim women, do not really use this option, and so it's not a real opting out. Like, it's really so the implication might be it could be really problematic to try it. I think looking at millet systems, there are lots of lessons to be learned, and I'm not sure it's a good idea to try it.
I'm happy to second that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the progress of the past 500 years has been driving a wedge back between religious and civil identity. We could probably say more on that, but
Come back tomorrow.